The puppy who found comfort under the oak tree. It was one of those crisp autumn afternoons at Maplewood Dog Park, when the soft sunlight began to sink behind the horizon and the cool night air started to make its presence known. Families and children gradually scattered, leaving behind only the peacefulness of nature. However, amid the calm, there was something unusual. A small puppy, with a tangled coat and large, sad eyes, always returned to the same corner, under an old oak tree, where it curled up in the night's cold, isolated from the others. Night after night, without fail, the puppy came back. It didn't mix with the other dogs that played, nor did it approach the family strolling happily by. It was a lonely dog that preferred stillness and darkness. It didn't bark, didn't seek attention, simply curled up in its corner and stayed there, as if waiting for something, though no one knew what. Officer Daniel Rivera, a local police officer who patrolled the park at night, had begun to notice the puppy on his rounds. At first, he thought it was just another stray dog that had found shelter in the park. But there was something in the puppy's eyes, that deep gaze, full of sadness and despair, that made Daniel feel a knot in his stomach. It was as if this small creature was carrying a pain that it could not express in words. Rivera, known in the community for his empathy and big heart, started to feel a strange connection with the puppy. His patrols were no longer just about ensuring the safety of the park. Now, every night, as he passed by the old oak tree, he felt something calling him, as if something in that little creature needed him. One particularly cold night, Rivera decided to approach the puppy. He parked his patrol car near the tree and stepped out into the cool air, breathing slowly to calm himself. He knew that any sudden movement could frighten the little animal, so he walked slowly, carefully, to avoid making noise. When he was close, he knelt down and, with a gentle gesture, offered the puppy a warm blanket and a small packet of food. The puppy, initially cautious, slowly lifted its head and looked into Rivera's eyes. It was in that moment that something inside Rivera broke. Seeing that pain reflected in the puppy's eyes, the officer could no longer hold back his tears. Never before had he experienced such an intense feeling of compassion. Rivera, with his professional training as a police officer, had always been a strong man, capable of handling difficult situations. But this moment, this silent connection with the puppy, showed him how vulnerable he truly was. He broke down in tears, unable to control it. That gaze of hopelessness, of abandonment, was too much for him. It felt as if the puppy's pain was also the pain of all those he couldn't help, of all those who suffered in silence. News of this encounter, of Officer Rivera's tears, quickly spread through the community. In the cafes and community centers of Maplewood, people began to talk about the crying cop and his bond with the stray puppy. Some were deeply moved by Rivera's empathy, while others wondered if a police officer should get so emotionally involved with a dog. At the police station, Rivera's colleagues had mixed feelings. Some admired the officer's vulnerability, believing it showed how deeply he cared for his community. Others feared that his emotional involvement might cloud his professional judgment and ability to enforce the law. But for Rivera, the encounter with the puppy was only the beginning of a personal mission. He decided to discover the story of the little animal, find out why it returned to the same spot every night, why it sought shelter under that oak tree. There was something in its behavior that suggested the puppy wasn't simply a stray, but was carrying with it a much deeper emotional burden. He started asking questions. He had spent several weeks observing the puppy, and now his investigation was reaching another level. He approached the park regulars, those who walked through the area often, like Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who always sat by the pond feeding the ducks. "I've seen that puppy every night," she told him with a melancholic voice. "I always thought it was waiting for someone, but that person never came." Mrs. Jenkins, with a distant look, recalled that many years ago, a little girl used to come to the park with that same puppy. They would sit together under the oak, laughing and playing. But one day, they never returned, and the puppy disappeared from everyone's sight. The elderly woman couldn't remember the details clearly, but her story sparked something in Officer Rivera, the suspicion that maybe the puppy had been part of a family that had disappeared in some way. Following his hunch, Rivera decided to visit the local animal shelter. There, he met Carla Martinez, a kind-hearted volunteer passionate about stray animals. "We've heard rumors about that puppy," Carla explained. "It seems like it's always been near the park, but it never wanted to come to us. It's scared, or maybe too proud to ask for help." Carla's words resonated deeply with Rivera. The puppy had not only been abandoned, but it was also carrying with it such immense pain that it couldn't approach anyone. With this new information, Officer Rivera felt more determined than ever to find the puppy's owner. He spent his nights researching, asking questions, and looking for any clues that might help. One day, while leaving food near the oak tree, he noticed something unusual. A piece of torn fabric, a fragment of a soft blue sweater, caught in a nearby bush. Rivera picked up the piece of fabric and, with his heart racing, wondered if it might have belonged to the family that once cared for the puppy. He returned to talking with the locals, including the regulars who frequented the park. An older man vaguely recalled a family who used to come there years ago. "I remember a little girl with a puppy," he said, his voice trembling. "They would sit under the oak, laughing. I never saw them leave, but one day, the puppy disappeared. The little girl never came back." That testimony made Rivera feel that he was finally close to uncovering the truth. Thus, the story of the puppy began to take shape. It had been part of a family who, for reasons unknown, had left, leaving the animal behind, stuck in a cycle of waiting and loneliness. Night after night, the puppy returned to the park, as if it was waiting for its owner to come back. News of Rivera's investigation continued to spread through the community. People began to see the puppy not just as a stray dog, but as a symbol of abandonment and hope. The story of the crying cop and the stray puppy touched many hearts, and the community came together to offer their help. Finally, one day, after weeks of investigation, Rivera found the clue he had been searching for. A witness recalled seeing the puppy's family in a nearby neighborhood before they moved away suddenly. The puppy, lost and confused, had been left behind, returning night after night to the only place it knew, the park. With a heart full of hope, Rivera took the puppy to the shelter, where it was examined and cared for. Although he couldn't reunite the puppy with its original family, he made a promise to find it a new home filled with love and care. The community, moved by Officer Rivera's dedication, also came together to offer the puppy a better life. The story of Officer Daniel Rivera and the puppy of Maplewood became a local legend, a reminder that empathy, compassion, and love can change lives, even in the darkest moments. Maplewood Dog Park was no longer just a place for playing dogs, but a symbol of hope, where a small puppy finally found comfort and a home full of love.